So the question is, how can I improve my fluency in speaking? So the first thing to remember is there are many different reasons why you might have a problem with speaking. So let me go through the main ones that I see when I'm doing IELTS speaking tests. For many people, there's not a problem. The problem isn't like a linguistic problem. It's a mindset problem, their attitude towards the IELTS speaking test. Because often what people will do in the IELTS speaking test is they will try and think of an impressive answer, or they will try and think of a high level idea or something like that. Remember what you're being scored on. You're being scored on fluency and coherence, grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation. Nothing to do with impressive ideas or anything like that. So often their fluency will suffer because they're thinking too much. They're overthinking about the ideas and the development of those ideas. So that's one non-linguistic, let's call it, problem. So just relax about the ideas. Pick an idea that's easy to talk about. That will solve 9 out of 10 fluency problems. Also, there are certain strategies that we have on the course that help you with part 1, part 2, and part 3 of speaking. Often when people first learn those strategies, their fluency goes down because they're thinking of the strategy. So they're thinking like, okay, I generate an idea and then think of this and then do this. So they're overthinking is kind of the enemy of fluency. That people, because they're thinking too much consciously. So you first have to master those strategies and be comfortable that your fluency will drop a little bit until you get to where you need to go, and then your fluency will improve. So those are like let's call them non-linguistic things. Related to language, your fluency is going to suffer if you are not confident with grammar and vocabulary particularly. So if you struggle with grammar and struggle with vocabulary, you will often your fluency is going to be poor, because you have to really consciously think, what's the structure I'm using? Okay, that article go there, that preposition there. Does that word mean the same as that? Okay, can I use it? So that's just really, really difficult to do, which is why people, when they're first learning a language, their fluency is not so good, because they have to consciously think about everything. Whereas people who are at a very high level, they don't even have to think about it. It's like when I'm speaking now, I don't think about grammar and vocabulary. It just comes to me because it's all in the subconscious part of my brain. So if that is a problem, improving your grammar and vocabulary is going to really, really help. Which brings me on to the final thing. Just sitting with a book, a grammar book or a vocabulary book, is not going to improve your fluency, because you have to do those things. Speaking is a productive skill. You have to produce the language, so you have to practice and get feedback on it and practice as much as possible, and that's really, really going to help. So identify what particular problem. You might have more than one of those problems, and then fix it that way. So that would be but I'd have to really listen to you. So I would suggest doing a one-on-one speaking test with us, and tell us, can you listen to the fluency in particular and identify what the problems are, and then we can talk about what the problems are. So good question. So your question is, sometimes I get a 6, sometimes I get an 8. Basically, why do IELTS scores fluctuate? So there are many reasons why IELTS scores fluctuate, but two main ones. Number one, don't use fake tests. We've already talked about this, about which tests are fake and which ones are real. Basically, if they come from Cambridge, British Council or IDP, they are real. Anybody else, they are fake. Because if someone is giving you a fake test, they haven't tested it enough. They haven't tested it with different students to understand whether it is a reliable test. So if you are getting, let's say you do a real test and you get a 6, and then you do a fake test and you get an 8, it's nothing to do with you. You haven't changed. It's just one is easier than the other. So you have to be very, very careful with that. The other thing to remember is we are human beings. And as human beings, our performance changes over time. So anyone who disagrees with me on this is like, well, okay, so if Liverpool played Barcelona 100 times, would the scores be exactly the same? No. It's like when they played earlier this year, I think Barcelona won 3-1, and then when they played 2 weeks later, Liverpool won like 4-0. Exactly the same players, everything's the same, but humans, the performance of humans differs depending on many things. In the context of IELTS, I have seen students get really high scores one time, and then the next time they get a really low score. And we talk to them and they say, oh, well, actually, I had a fight with my husband the night before, and I was really nervous, and I didn't sleep, and I didn't eat a proper dinner that night. And then in the morning, my baby was crying, and I couldn't get a babysitter, so I didn't eat a good breakfast, and then I was rushing to get there, and I was really stressed out, and I was late a little bit, and then I forgot to bring water, and I was really dehydrated, and I was like, okay, no wonder why you got a lower score. And it should be, in a perfect world, none of those things should matter, but they do matter. They really do matter. Think about just your working week. Some days you're absolutely, killing it. You're really productive. You're getting a lot of work done. Other days you can't even you can't even write one sentence. And then people do the IELTS test, and one day they get 6 and one day they get 8, and they're like, oh, it's the test's fault. It's like the test didn't change, you changed. So the most important thing to do is to make sure you're doing real tests, and make sure that you're optimizing your performance the week leading up to the day before and the day off test day. And go and check out in the mindset course the 2 modules on that, because they're really important. But also understand what your real level is. Do like 3 real tests. What's your average score? That's about your level. And then figure out, let's say you need a 7, but you got 6.5 in one test. Why did you get 6.5? What are the things that might cause you to get 6.5? And then attack those. But don't blame the test. The test isn't perfect, but most of the time it's you rather than it. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, so next question is basically asking about what happens if you have zero knowledge, no knowledge whatsoever about a task 2 topic. How are you supposed to generate ideas? So there's a few things we need to think about. Number 1, does this happen very often? Well, we have to think about whether you are looking at real, genuine questions or whether you are looking at fake questions. If you are looking at fake questions, the people creating fake questions, and what I mean by fake questions is anyone apart from Cambridge, who are the people who write all the questions, the British Council, who are affiliated with Cambridge, or IDP, who are affiliated with Cambridge in terms of IELTS, unless it's from them or their books or their websites, it's not a real question. All right. If it comes from, it doesn't matter if the website is called like IELTS official real amazing tests. It doesn't matter what they say. It's a fake question. And people who create fake questions don't know how to write questions. So what they do is they think IELTS questions are really difficult. Let's pick a really difficult topic. So most of the fake questions are on topics that you know nothing about. People freak out. People are like, oh, I know nothing about this. And then we get this. So make sure you're using real questions. Look at real questions. Like go through the Cambridge books and think about what percentage of them is you know nothing. Like nothing about it. They are very rare. Okay? So it's a bit like saying, I'd love to go on holiday, but what happens if the plane crashes? Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No. It's highly unlikely. I'm about to go on a plane right after this, and if I die in a plane crash, this video will be pretty funny, but maybe not funny for me, but be funny for everyone else maybe. So you're worrying about things that probably will not happen. Also, most of the people who have this problem or think they have this problem, they say something like, so I got this question, it's all about education, and I know nothing about education. I say, oh really? How old are you? Like, I'm 30 years old. When did you start school? When I was 5. When did you stop school? When I was 25. It's like, okay, so 2/3 of your life you were in education, but you know nothing about education. It's like, you know way more than you think that you know. So that's another thing. The other thing to remember is, it's a writing test. It's an English test. They are testing your ability to write in English. They're not testing your knowledge of that topic. So I would always keep, reading the news, especially like education news, technology news, health news, the environment news. Don't read the headlines. Like, they're not going to ask you a question about Donald Trump or Brexit. But those common topics that come up again and again and again, read those, and you probably will not have a problem. Also, practice your idea generation, and have faith that you know way more than you think, and they're not testing your knowledge. I know that's not the answer that you're looking for. You're probably looking for some little trick or technique or strategy that if you get a question you know nothing about, which you probably do know a lot more, that you can magically write about it. It doesn't exist. So but probably will not happen.